evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us on our first evening of May. We are starting off the new month with quite a bit of rain. It's starting to slow down a little bit, but it definitely is still wet out there. So, Joe, can we expect the rain to continue through the evening hours as well?
Yeah, although the heavy rain, I got up, I don't know about you, Maya, but I looked out the window when I got up and it was just pouring.
Yep.
And then thankfully it ended. I mean, it really tapered off by the time I went into work, so I didn't have to run, onto the vehicle. But tomorrow we're looking at still a few showers, but the steady rain will kind of wind down. Although with clouds, it's still going to be a little on the cool side tomorrow. So we'll look at that, and I'm sure you have plans. I do. For the weekend. We'll take a look at that too coming up a little later.
All right, thank you so much, Joe. Well, it has been 8 years since an explosion at a Wexford County motel that left then 13-year-old Brian Adams with severe burns. Adams is now in college, and he is actually appealing a decision by the Michigan Appeals Court in his civil lawsuit. Now, when it was first in trial court in 2022, it named multiple people, including Adams' mother, the motel owners, and the Wexford County prosecutor, and more. And in that civil suit, and what Adams is challenging is the dismissal of the former Manton police chief from that suit, and he's appealing that decision to the state's highest court. Our Allie Baxter has a full story.
A few days before an explosion fueled by butane gas caused severe burn injuries to a 13-year-old Brian Adams, Manton's former police chief Michael Long pulled Adams' mother over for a traffic stop and arrested her.
Leaving the children on the side of the road, rendering them no aid. Not calling a family member, not calling CPS.
According to court documents, Long then told her two sons in the car to walk back to the motel they came from, later bringing the brothers McDonald's. The brothers were alone for a week at the Green Mill Motel.
The child protection laws were put into place as a mandatory law to protect children. That's why police, firefighters, school teachers, reporters like yourself, and anyone who serves in a public capacity has a mandatory obligation to report suspected child abuse and neglect.
It's this incident and knowing that Adams' mother had drugs at the motel that led to Long's inclusion in a civil lawsuit filed by Brian. The lawsuit argued Long violated Michigan's child protection law. The law requires law enforcement officers report suspected child abuse or neglect.
This officer is not only responsible for being part of what happened to my son, and as much as I hate to say it, this officer also had the ability to save Amanda from making bad decisions.
Long argued he's entitled to governmental immunity. Long, the trial and appeals court, and a similar case argue that mandatory reporting doesn't override governmental immunity.
The man didn't follow his law. He doesn't get protections of immunity. Everyone's case that involves governmental immunity starts on third base. Oh, it's government. Bittner, just throw the case away. And that's not how the justice system is intended to be. There's supposed to be equal protections underneath the law.
Robert says now it's not just about continuing to get justice for Brian, but advocating for those who could find themselves in the same position, which is why he's asking for the community's help, writing to the state Supreme Court and Attorney General's office.
It's been an emotional and mental nightmare fighting for Brian. His medical needs, everything that he needs, he's striving to succeed. He's at Grand Valley State. He's doing good. But just because he's doing good and he's getting by, there's a lot of things he needs that aren't covered anymore.
That was Allie Baxter reporting. Now, the appeals court did know that to avoid the scenario detailed in the lawsuit, the legislature may want to amend the state's child protection law. Turning over to state news now, Senate Democrats are proposing that more money be allocated to schools. Senate Bill 166 would add a little more than $1 billion to the school aid fund budget, raising the total in the 2026 budget to $23.8 billion. And as Courtney Bennett explains, the funding will help address buildings that are aging and have been aging for quite some time.
A recent study from the School Finance Research Foundation evaluated Michigan schools and found most were in dire need of infrastructure upgrades.
We looked at 2,500 plus schools. 300 of them were over 75 years old.
And with buildings more than 7 decades old, things start to break down and fall apart. Stephen Ezekian is the executive director of the Research Foundation, and he says the problem is the state doesn't set aside dollars for these types of upgrades.
There is currently no dedicated money in the school funding in Michigan to address capital needs.
$350 million in the budget sounds like a hefty number. However, the state would only be investing less than 2% of what's needed.
The study speaks for itself. It identified $22.8 billion worth of need over the next 10 years. Half of that is in HVAC systems and roofs.
Typically, what happens when schools need upgrades, districts go to voters.
Because those are based on property values, the ability of districts to raise money with bond issues is uneven across the state. So the same thing will happen, has been going on for years, is that districts will try to squeeze money out of their operational budget to patch the issues they have with their buildings, but not rebuild them.
During the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee this week, Senator Darren Camilleri says that the dollars would be provided to schools via grants.
It's going to prioritize roofing and HVAC, which is connected to the study that was done, and those are the two top needs of schools across Michigan.
This bill was passed in the subcommittee and moves on to the Senate committee. This bill was passed in the subcommittee and moves on to the Senate Committee on Appropriations. Ezekian says that this funding proposal dedicated to building upgrades is a step in the right direction.
We're supportive of what the Senate budget has in terms of looking at the study and taking a very small first step to address some of the needs that we identified. We're encouraged by the attention that it got in the legislature.
And that was Courtney Bennett reporting from our sister station down in Flint. Courtney is joining us live now for more on this conversation. Hey, Courtney, thanks so much for joining us on Unscripted.
Hi, Maya. Thanks for having me tonight.
So one thing that really surprised me in your report is that currently the state doesn't set aside any money for infrastructure when it comes to schools. So why are lawmakers looking to change that now?
They're really looking to change that based on the subcommittee that they had earlier this week. That was on Tuesday. They said that they wanted to change it because of this report that came out. This report was actually published in March, and it found, again, as I mentioned, was the $22.8 billion that's needed in the next 10 years for these infrastructure updates. Another thing that I found really interesting is the state's never done a report like this before, and buildings here are more than, in some cases, 75 years old. So you would think that they would assess these over time and find that they needed these repairs so it didn't escalate to this point. But I think that this report, again, it was paid for by the state, it was asked for by the state to be conducted, really showed lawmakers that there is this need to invest in things like HVAC systems, like roofs. And the third thing that schools needed was those upgrades in electrical issues.
And we know a lot of schools around the entire state certainly need some upgrades. And here in northern Michigan, we have quite a few schools that they do have bond and millage proposals on the upcoming May ballot to cover some of these different infrastructure issues. So what would be the biggest difference if schools could now rely on state funds to pay for these infrastructures instead of having to rely on community support for millages and bonds when it, at the end of the day, all come back to the taxpayer?
It does. It ultimately always comes back to the taxpayer. Is something that, so the $1 billion would be an addition. So last year, the state invested a little more than $20 billion to the school aid fund. This year, it would be that almost $23 billion, just under $23 billion. And then this additional $1 billion would be added to that. But it's only, what I found interesting is the infrastructure needs are, again, $22.8 billion over the next 10 years. But Senate Democrats have only allocated that $350 million, and schools would have to apply for that money. So it would be designated for HVAC systems and roofs. So if schools needed something else, then they would have to find that money elsewhere. And as you mentioned, they would go to those taxpayers and have them do bonds and millages. But another thing is in our area down here in mid-Michigan, in the Flint area, Genesee County, we have school systems that can't go to their taxpayers because there's not enough taxable base. And I think that Ezekian had mentioned that in my story, and he said that that's where a lot of people, you know, these school officials, they go to, they write up these bonds, they write up these millages so that it ends up on the ballots. Mm-hmm. But in some cases, that's just not possible. For instance, here we have Beecher Community Schools, and, you know, they have a very low taxable base. they can't go to those residents who live there and ask them to vote. So they've really relied on money from the state and money from different grants to ultimately their goal is to build a new high school. So they couldn't go to their taxpayers.
So for some school districts, this could provide an additional option for funding, but for others, it could potentially be maybe one of the only options.
That is very true. Yeah. And again, if you can't go to your taxpayers, then what are you left to do? Well, these schools, I mean, in some cases, like they found from the reports, they are falling apart and will continue to fall apart unless these issues are addressed.
And so obviously this is a plan that is introduced by Senate Democrats. Do you know if it would have bipartisan support?
One lawmaker said during the subcommittee he was actually looking for other elements to this that was actually in Governor Gretchen Whitmer's budget package that was missing from the Senate Democrats package. And so he was questioning Camilleri and asking him why it was missing. It has to do with holding schools accountable, seeing that they're actually meeting standards so that they can get this money. I guess that's in what Governor Gretchen Whitmer proposed, but it's missing from this. It was voted out of committee by both Democrats and Republicans from that subcommittee and heading to the Appropriations Committee. So I think that it has that support. But again, I think that lawmakers on both sides are questioning, what else can they add that's important to schools and teachers and just the community in general.
Sure. Is there a goal for when they're hoping to have a budget finalized?
They said in the subcommittee that they are looking at that July 1 deadline, and Democrats at least are very confident that they can meet that deadline at this point.
Courtney, is there anything else that you want to mention about this story that we haven't talked about yet?
I don't think so. I mean, and I'm sure that you guys too, again, this was released in March. We have the full link on our website. And I just find it so interesting that over the last several decades that the schools here in Michigan have never been assessed for infrastructure. And like you mentioned, it's very interesting that the state has never set aside dollars specifically addressing infrastructure needs for schools, across, we have 83 counties and with a lot of public schools in them, and nothing has ever been set aside for that. So maybe this will be a step, like they said, in the right direction to hopefully allocate more dollars in the future to address those needs and really help out the schools. Because at the end of the day, it always comes down to helping the students in the classroom and then also the teachers as well.
Absolutely. And it seems like maybe infrastructure isn't a top priority for these school districts until something does happen to their buildings, and that's when they realize, like, oh, we do need to address this now. We've kind of been putting it off for a few years maybe, but now it is front and center, needs to be addressed.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
All right, Courtney, thank you so much for joining us on Unscripted. We really appreciate it. And let's take a look at our question of the day related to this story. So how would you rather have school infrastructure projects funded? Scan the QR code on your screen right now. That will take you to our website, UpNorthLive.com. And it is dead split between state funds and local bonds and millages. 50-50 tie right now. So be sure to vote on our question of the day. We have about 124 votes at the moment, but we will continue to keep an eye on those results. It's not very often that we do have a question of the day that is this dead even split. So it's interesting to see. It's also interesting to see some of the comments over on our Facebook page. So if you do want to join in on the conversation, head over to the Up North Live Facebook page, find this post talking about our question of the day, and leave your thoughts there. I will read some of your comments at the end of the show. All right, let's take a quick commercial break, but coming up in just a couple of minutes, Joe will have much more on what you can expect for your Friday and even a look ahead to the weekend when it comes to the weather. Stay with us.
I'm Jada Johnson from Big Boys TV, and the Fish and Game Report is sponsored by Johnson's Propane.
A pretty soggy start to the month of May, but it is some needed rain. We've had high levels of fire danger recently, and of course, usually the saying is April showers brings May flowers. Didn't have too many showers in April, so we're also going to say May showers brings May flowers.
Right.
There it is.
Yeah, it's a day difference, right, from April to May. Right. So that rhymes. I'll give you that.
Thank you.
Yeah, some rain. It's good, too, because once we get into the weekend, kind of a dry stretch for the weekend. So it's good to get the rain we did have today. But it is soggy. It still is. It's damp. Take a look at our cameras here. Drummond Island, a look right now over the Mackinac Bridge, downtown Gaylord, and then at our studios here just west of Traverse City, a fair amount of fog. By the way, look at the freighter going through there along the St. Mary's River there in the Drummond Island camera. You can see that there in the background. All right, three big things in weather. Let's take a look. Cool and damp through Friday. Showers in the UP tomorrow. Could see a little wintry mix maybe, but just in time for Saturday and Sunday. We have a nice weekend coming up, dry with a good amount of sunshine. And then early next week, there's signs of a weak system perhaps approaching the area, actually from the south or east, with a few showers perhaps on Monday and also on Tuesday. But under the clouds, it's been a cool day today. Temperatures are in the 30s and 40s, although Manistee is at 50, Big Rapids at 53, but a cool one. Sheboygan 39, you've had rain, one of those kind of days out there today. And here's a look at all that rain from south to north, progressing across the state earlier today. And we're left now with, as we take a look at the current radar, with just showers and drizzle. And that's going to be the case overnight tonight. We'll continue to see a few showers, drizzle at times, a pretty cloudy evening and overnight. Here's a look at how much rain has fallen so far. If it says 0, ignore that. Those are places where the rain's not picked up or reported. But Traverse City and Ludington, almost 7/10 of an inch of rain so far over the last 12 hours. Here's what happens moving ahead here now. Low pressure will swirl through here. Tomorrow, cloudy. Now, in the afternoon in the UP watch, right there, we could see a little rain-snow mix north of Newberry, maybe around the Lake Superior shoreline, that area. That ends, and then we start Saturday kind of cloudy with maybe a little early day fog in spots. It will take a little while, but gradually the sun will break the clouds up. We'll get some clearing in here in the afternoon, drier air punches in, and then a nice day coming up on Sunday too. So there's Sunday, it looks nice. A little cooler Saturday, there's the weekend, low and mid 50s, but Sunday, low and mid 60s. Sunday will be around 10 degrees warmer than on Saturday. So the extended forecast, there's the nice weekend wedged between some clouds. And notice Monday, Tuesday, we've had to really, compared to yesterday's forecast, up the cloud cover, drop the temperature a little bit, and bring in the chance for a few showers. Does not look like a big deal, though. Once we get to Wednesday and Thursday, we're back with some sunshine in 70s, Maya.
And we'll still take those 60s.
I'll take 50s right now.
Right, if that's cooler, that's
right.
Totally fine.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, thanks so much, Joe. Let's take another quick break, but on the other side, we will bring in sports director Harrison Beebe. Stick around, that's next. Well, of course, there's a pretty big basketball game tonight between the Pistons and the Knicks, and our sports director Harrison Beebe caught up with a pretty big name in the world of basketball today. For more on that conversation, let's turn things over to Harrison. Hey.
That's right, Maya. Tom Kozelko, he played in the NBA Finals 50 years ago this spring when he played for the then Washington Capitals, then turned into the Washington Bullets, which are now the Washington Wizards, taking on the Golden State Warriors back then. And yeah, he's had quite the career in basketball. Just recently inducted into the Ohio Basketball Hall of Fame. He had a great career playing for the Toledo Rockets in the MAC conference, but he started his basketball career playing at Traverse City Central. We had a conversation with him in our Jimmy John Sports Corner.
The following segment is sponsored by Jimmy John's of Traverse City.
You're already in the Toledo Hall of Fame.
In the Toledo, yeah.
For the college.
Yes.
And now you're getting the Ohio Basketball Hall of Fame. You know, to get these honors 50 years later, what does that mean to you to know they're still recognizing?
Well, they finally, I thought, you know, it's like that maybe they're running out of people to, wonder if they're running out of people to put into the Hall of Fame. But anyway, it's nice because the coach I played for at Toledo has been inducted. He was inducted a number of years ago, and it's a real honor for me, obviously. And I also feel like I represent the teams that I played on.
You played some minutes in the NBA. Got the Washington, they were the Capitals at the time, to the finals.
You know, the high point of my career, you know, you're euphoric to get to the finals, and you know, it's such a great feeling. And then within a span of like 10 days, we were swept 4 straight by Golden State. We lost 4 straight, and so we went for the highest of highs and the lowest of lows within a matter of like 10 days.
Who's the best player you've shared the court with?
As far as the teammate, would have to be Wes Unseld, and the most interesting. The best player had to be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I just from the standpoint of, you know, his longevity.
Wow.
So, yep, he actually got to guard Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Also, other names that didn't make the cut. Pistol Pete Maravich, he said, was one of those players that just wowed him back in those days. And Oscar Robertson, one of my personal favorite NBA historic players, he said were just amazing to watch them play basketball and be on the same floor as them at the same time.
What a great conversation. Where can people see the whole thing?
Well, tune in. We'll have more on that interview tonight during Sports at 11.
And of course, Pistons Knicks tipping off tonight at 7:30. A lot on the line. Really quick, what's your prediction?
Let's go to Game 7. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, thanks so much, Harrison. Let's take a quick break. Question of the day, live results straight ahead.
Salon services are furnished by Epiphany Advanced Academy in East Acme.
Democrats in the Michigan Senate are proposing that more money be allocated to schools to address infrastructure issues. So our question today is, would you rather have school infrastructure projects funded by state funds or local bonds and millages? Same results as earlier, split right down the middle, 50-50. You don't see this very often. And this comment on Facebook, I think, sums it up pretty well. Ashley says it needs to be some from both. You can read more comments on our Facebook page and join in on the conversation. We are all out of time here on Unscripted. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you back here at 11 o'clock tonight. Take care.